It is 6:01 p.m. on Monday, October 2nd, so I'm going to call to order this regular meeting of the Winooski City Council. Please join us in the Pledge of Allegiance, led by Deputy Mayor Thomas Brennan.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. First up is agenda review. Any adjustments to the agenda this evening?
No.
Okay. Next up is public comment. This is a chance for attendees to make comment about any items not on tonight's agenda. If you're here for a specific agenda item, we would ask you to wait for that. We do have public comment time for all agenda items. Do you wish to speak for public comment? No. Okay. I see we have a couple of Zoom attendees. If you would like to make a public comment, please use the chat or raise hand feature to let us know. We'll move you into a speaking role in Zoom.
All right, not seeing anything here.
Okay. Thank you. We will move to the consent agenda. We have our meeting minutes from September 18th, payroll warrant for September 3 to 16, accounts payable September 27, and a justice assistance grant application. Any questions about the consent agenda?
No.
Okay, do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Bryn, second by Aurora. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you. Council reports. Thomas, you want to start?
Sure. So our last downtown Winooski meeting was last week. Essentially, it was just an update of the information that Melissa gave to council. She just went over that in detail with everybody on the downtown Winooski board. We talked about some other upcoming things, such as a possible lighting ceremony for the tree in the Rotary, as well as the holiday pop-up shop that downtown Winooski hosts every year. In terms of immediate reminders, Blingo is back to a new format. It will be the first Tuesday of every month, so there will be a Blingo tomorrow at Monkey House at 6 o'clock. And downtown Winooski is also starting to look for volunteers to assist with the pumpkin celebration that we do in the Rotary. We need folks to pick up pumpkins, carve pumpkins, and light pumpkins. So if you are interested in that, please go to the downtown Winooski website.
Thank you. I last week hosted an orientation for new commissioners. It was recorded, so anyone who couldn't make it can watch, and anyone who joins in the future can watch. I want to update you all that stemming from the monthly housing roundtable meetings, the Champlain Valley Office of Economic Opportunity has been working with our Winooski School District multilingual program staff and the Winooski Housing Authority to deliver tenant education workshops in Winooski. Over the month of October, they will have these sessions with 3 different language groups. This is exciting because this is one of the specific recommendations from our equity audit. I attended the Chittenden County Regional Planning Commission meeting this month and want to let you all know that the state is setting state level targets for housing needs, and then the regional commission is going to create both regional and municipal targets based on that data, anticipating by next fall. So that's data that we will have access to for our own planning.
Thanks.
And Deputy Mayor Renner and I met with our state representatives to check in on legislative priorities so we can update those at an upcoming city council meeting based on what's changed since last year. All right, Bryn.
Sure. Airport Commission is meeting this Wednesday, the 4th. That's both in person and online. Regular items on the agenda are noise exposure map updates and sound installation updates. So there's doesn't look like there's anything new or unusual. I'm hoping that they have an update from the public meeting they had this past month. So we'll see how many folks were in attendance and if any of the comments were related to the sound installation efforts underway. Municipal infrastructure, our next meeting is the 19th. It'll be at the pool, also hybrid, so folks can attend online. That'll be a joint meeting with the Finance Commission. to talk about capital budget priorities coming into FY25 planning. Our most recent meeting this past month focused on long-term improvements to the LaFountain Dion Street, and a lot of really great conversation there. We anticipate an updated public meeting perhaps later this month or maybe next month, but more to come on that for public input. So really excited to see the progress and participation in that conversation. The Bridge Committee, there was a public meeting about the Winooski Bridge replacement efforts, kind of a general listening session. That was very well attended. I think all combined in person as well as online, there were almost 100 people participating. So it was really, really nice to see that. The next public meeting for that probably won't happen until January at the earliest. And since the first one was in Winooski, the next one they will be in Burlington. And the committee, the smaller advisory committee, will continue meeting monthly. So if there's any questions in the interim that I can bring to that group, just let me know. And you can sign up for web updates. I'm sure that our city manager will get into that as well. steal her thunder. So yeah, lots of great conversations underway, and some really exciting capital projects moving forward.
Thank you.
Yep.
Aurora?
All right, so haven't had any meetings of the commission since we last spoke. However, they are both coming up this next week. So Safe, Healthy, Connected People will meet Tuesday the 10th, and that's at 6:30. This is a virtual meeting, so please attend via Zoom. And Inclusion and Belonging will have their meeting on the 12th, so on Thursday, and that's at 6 p.m. also via Zoom. So hope people can join for that. So far for the Inclusion and Belonging Commission, on the agenda includes thinking about ways to discussing the bullet items listed in the equity audit executive summary, and thinking about other ways that we can engage with folks about the equity audit in a way that's more accessible.
Thank you. Charlie?
All right. The Winooski Housing Commission met on Tuesday, September 26th. We did some housekeeping, introducing our new members and getting everybody implemented into their new roles. We had our first discussion and overview over the housing director's work addressing short-term rental restrictions, provisions, and things like that. And we also looked over our changes to our interest rate buy-down policy, and also talked a little bit more about swapping our investment into down payment support grants versus focusing more on interest rate buy-downs. Our next meeting will be October 24th at 6 p.m. And that's what I got.
Okay, we'll move on to city updates. Elaine?
Okay, I made a very strategic error in selecting where I was going to take this meeting, so apologies for any background noise. Please be aware that the contractor partner with the Public Works Department is tentatively scheduled to begin annual structural maintenance work on the Winooski parking garage located on Cascade Way on Tuesday, October 10th, and will continue through the fall season, weather permitting. Work areas throughout the entire garage will be temporarily cordoned with traffic detours as needed, but the garage will remain fully operational and open to the public during the project. So just keep an eye out for the detours. And pass holders unable to park in their assigned space or level due to this work may park in the upper levels at no additional cost. Thank you for your cooperation around this work. And an update on the police department chief search. So we received 7 bids for the search contractor, the firm that would help us recruit and secure a police chief. We reviewed them, and I should be extending a contract to the finalist in the next week or so. So please do keep an eye out for public input opportunities. We definitely want to hear from everybody in the community what you think are the qualities are important in our next chief.
Thank you, Elaine. Okay, moving into regular items. First up is on for discussion or approval, appointing a Winooski Memorial Library Committee youth member. Ray, are you?
Yeah,
Are you-
and I believe Nate is in there, as well as perhaps Jess, and I'm gonna move Lauren Reed over on the Zoom to a panelist.
Would either
And
of you
then-
like to make a introductory statement?
I can too, if I can't see the, there we go.
Thanks, Ray. We have Talia Bennett here before us. Talia is a ninth grader at the Winooski School District. And in March 2023, City Council approved a change to the Winooski Library Committee charter to allow for a youth member. And so Talia applied about a month ago. With members of the library committee, we interviewed Talia. She was great and is here before you now for your approval to the committee.
Welcome, Talia. Thank you for applying and for your interest in engaging. I was impressed with some of your existing volunteer experience that I saw in the application. Is there anything that you want to share with us, or just general introduction? Well, we're happy to have you. Are there any questions or comments from council?
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm excited for your interest.
Okay. Well, do I have a motion to approve the appointment of Talia Bennett to the Winooski Memorial Library Committee?
So moved.
Second.
Second?
Motion by Bryn, second by Aurora. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And thanks for coming in. Okay, for item B is on for discussion approval appointment of a finance commission member. Angela, do you want to say anything?
Sure. Maggie did send an email that she was unfortunately unable to rearrange her schedule to attend tonight, but she's very excited about joining the commission, and as the mayor can attest, was very passionate during the interview and will bring a small business voice to the Economic Vitality Commission for the city.
Second what you said, we are missing that sort of business input on the commission right now with someone else's departure. And through Maggie's work, she actually has a lot of engagement with community members. So very excited.
Nice.
Any questions, concerns? Would anyone like to make a motion to approve the Finance Commission appointment?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Thomas, second by Bryn. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Motion carries. Thank you all. Okay, we are on to item C. Public hearing has been called for amendments to the Municipal Code of Ordinances, Chapter 17, Public Building Registry. I'll invite our Fire Chief, John Audie, up.
Good evening.
Welcome. Would you like to make any introductory statements before we open the hearing?
Yeah, so in large part, this was updates to the existing Chapter 17, the Public Building Registry, previously the Landlord Registry Program. And I would just like to point out there's one small recommendation from our legal counsel to add a very minor part to, let me get to Section 17.08, issuance of certificates and terms of inspections. It ends on page 8 as number 9. Mr. De Palma recommends that we add 10, and it would state, for any public building that contains a dwelling unit as that term is defined in Chapter 9 of the Winooski Municipal Code, is determined to have violated the minimal housing standards of said Chapter 9. It's a roundabout way of connecting the definition of the dwelling unit that is put into Chapter 9 so that we're not crossing over. So it's, it doesn't put anybody at any, it doesn't substantially change the code, it just brings them to Chapter 9 for that definition. So it's not adding any other regulation or anything like that, it's simply connecting it for a definition. So in my mind, it's, and in Bob's, it's a minor change,
Okay.
minor recommendation. So I believe that you can continue with the public hearing if you so wish and possible adoption.
Yes, so I will now open up the public hearing to take any public comments. If you're in the room, please raise your hand. If you're on Zoom, please raise your hand. Okay. Hearing no comment, I will now close this public hearing. We can proceed to council discussion. Were there any questions from council?
I wanted to thank you for making this a little bit more foolproof between the versions, so thanks for doing the effort on that.
It's a team effort, thanks.
Okay. Hearing no discussion, I will move us on to item D, which is potential approval to adopt the amendments to Chapter 17. Is that something that staff would advise moving forward with versus waiting for Chapter 9?
Yes, the way Bob tied it together with that paragraph, he had no problem with us moving forward with this tonight. Is that, Elaine, you agree with that? Yeah.
Okay, great.
Yes.
Any concerns from council?
Just the clarity of the addition in 17.08.
Okay. Would someone like to make a motion to approve adoption of amendments to Municipal Code of Ordinances, Chapter 17, Public Building Registry, with the changes we have seen this evening?
So moved.
Second?
Motion by Aurora, second by Thomas. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Motion carries. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for your efforts, John, and to the Housing Commission for reviewing those.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, we are jamming through here. We are on to item E, O'Brien Community Center update. I see we have Michael here. Ray, would you like to?
I'll jump on the virtual from across the hall just because I'm multitasking, if that's all
Certainly,
right.
certainly.
No offense, Michael, hopefully. All right. So Michael, I don't know if you are up for coming up to the microphone. I can do a quick table set, and then I think as the architect of the document, would love to have your kind of wisdom to share it. But as folks know on the council, we've been working with our partners here at CHT for, gosh, the better part of probably a year and a half now, with conversations around the O'Brien Center and a potential future kind of redevelopment of that parcel. I think through that hard work and patience and creativity, we've come to, I think, sort of a potential turning point in this project. And so wanted to come to council tonight, lay out a projected game plan and, sort of get a head nod from council to say, this path seems like a good one, in which case we will work then with CHT to develop more formal, agreement documents and bring something back in the very near future for council to approve. But I think before putting that legwork in, wanted to really kind of lay this out for y'all, get questions answered. Again, Michael's here with his experience and wisdom on this, and thus far has been a really fantastic partner to work with on this project. So I think in spite of us collectively driving the architect a little bit batty, it's been a really fantastic partnership thus far. So with that, I'll turn it over to Michael again, who I think has the expertise and skills and knowledge and help put this document together.
Thanks. So we're
Welcome.
good evening to all of you. So it's been a great collaboration so far. We're going to move to the next level here. We're about to hire finally an architect in a real formal way. We've had the availability of Duncan Wisniewski as a pay-as-you-go basis, but now we're gonna begin to sort of engage that firm in full estimating, hiring subs. You could sort of see in the document a wide range of the things that really need to pay attention to. We know that's the first thing, is to really finalize the schematic design. The second thing we have to really do is finalize the budget. The budget I gave you is our best guess after doing this work for, a couple of decades now, but really needs a firmer, fuller, clearer set of conditions and based upon final schematics, what the real costs are. The third part of it is that we need to bring in, and we have begun discussions of bringing in a fundraising group to help us raise some money for this purpose. A good chunk of this money will come from a combination of sort of federal and state resources, new market tax credits, but there's going to be a gap. And we know that the smaller the more we could raise in that gap, the more affordable the property will be to you all and to the other tenants. Your city team has given us what they're willing to pay. It's pretty inexpensive, I should let you know that. And so we're working towards that number as being sort of the driver of everything we're doing here in terms of the process. We've come pretty far, but we've been mostly, I would say it's feasibility and conceptual, and now we really need to begin to really dig in. I think we have the city, and I think the CHCB has earmarks potentially if that all happens. If that does happen, then I think we have some opportunities to sort of bring in those capital resources. But again, we're about to spend a lot more money, and so we want to be able to sort of hear from you all that this is legit on your part. I think what we say is that we'll come back with a development agreement, an operating agreement, and a lease agreement. I would say the development agreement probably will come first, but the others will follow fairly quickly. We have those kinds of things typically. We do have some conversations, I think the final, to finish up with CHCB, since they are the principal tenant. They are about 40% of the building, more or less. So we have to finalize those things in the next couple of weeks as well. We have set aside, you probably heard, we got some money recently, and we've set aside some money for that, for this purpose. I think we've had some conversations, kind of circuitous, maybe quiet conversations a week or so ago, saying we'll potentially have the money and resource to come sooner to be able to sort of take the debt off of the city's books. And in that way help the operating of the property next fiscal year, or certainly in the short term, and are able and willing to do that sooner than the development activity being completed. So what I will say is that we can be really creative. Often enough, staff stops me from hurting ourselves and making sure that we're doing something and everything appropriately and legally. I think that, though, we have the ability to do that now, so we want to see and figure out if we can. I think that would be a full commitment from us to you then as a result. But as we do that, we want to know that we can go forward and redevelop the property and do what we say we want to be able to do. So I think I've said pretty much, I summarized pretty much what's in here, not in terms of details, but certainly in terms of broadly where we want to go. So we do this at our board meeting. We go, yeah, it's a good idea, keep going. I'd love to be able to get a good head nod. I've done that before with you all, but we're getting closer and we're getting more serious. And so I'd love to be able to sort of, I'm assuming the staff wants to know too. I'm ready to hear from you whether we're going in the right direction here or not.
Thank you so much, Michael.
Oh, there's one other thing. We do have to get a zoning change. So that is kind of a critical piece.
Yeah,
it's on my list of things here as well.
Yeah, and Eric and I have had conversations about that and sort of timing and staging, so that's on the staff's radar as well. But thank you, Michael, for bringing that up.
Congratulations on your
Thanks.
financial situation,
Yeah.
and thank you so much for considering this project for some of that money.
Sure.
For the public benefit, this project expands Community Health Services in Winooski, retains existing tenants, adds new space for our library, the event hall and community kitchen, and retains that community accessible space. I think my read is this is going to be an improvement to our community center, bring it to a higher functioning level that is, for a space that's really critical to our community. So I'm very excited about this. I will pause though and see if we have questions from council.
You answered a couple of the ones that I had. I think the one other that I have is maybe a little bit more for city staff. Thinking about, I see that, so changes to the library are is gonna kind of be separate cost from the rest of the project, and just, I was trying to think about, would fundraising for both of those projects kind of compete with each other or confuse each other? That was the one concern I had.
I could also answer that, I think.
Yeah, go ahead. While you're panning over, I'll just say too, Nate has been tracking some funding in the Vermont Department of Libraries as well that is sort of being earmarked for more significant capital improvements to libraries. So it's a grant, it's not a guarantee, but I think we have a pretty competitive and compelling project here. So we are looking at that as a potential funding source for, a portion of it. And then I think, Michael, I'll let you answer sort of the fundraising question.
I think our thought was that everybody's in on this together. Okay. We're doing one capital campaign to raise money in the community. But individual organizations like CHCB and the city of Winooski and others have access to different kinds of resources that we will go after with you on your behalf or with you, and together. So earmarks, monies for libraries, monies for community health centers, funds that come from the state of Vermont for community centers, all of those things will all be lined up, and we have a group ready to go ahead and be aggressive on getting all of those resources and supporting city staff with their expertise is there, CHCB with their expertise is for writing those kinds of things. You all will identify sources, CHCB will identify sources, we will do that, put it all together. We'll bring in a new market tax credits, which is about a quarter of the resources, and that's our work. And then the assumption is that we'll lead the capital campaign to raise money in the community. Probably the thing that we haven't really put our head around completely is all of the fit up. And mostly is that we want to have the building to be really, really well done for everybody to simply just put in the furnishings. CHCB's furnishings are a little different than others, and libraries' furnishings might be a little different than others too. So we had to think about that. I would love it to be simply together as well still, but I think we have to have some discussions about how that's going to work and how that's all going to pan out. And CHCB, I think, feels like it could raise a lot of money. I don't know that for sure. There's a lot of money here. So we're going to be talking to them some more this week and try to iron and figure that part out. But I think of it, Counselor, as a joint activity with individuals talking to the people they resource from and us supporting with information, data, narrative, plans, specs, all that is necessary to show that in fact we're ready to go. If that makes some sense.
That really does.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. That answers my concern.
I'm glad you brought that up, Aurora, because it is, like Michael's saying, it's important that all of us that are interested in this effort, that we are telling the joint story. This is a community center with community services. So the more we can all be on that page, and we can't afford to make it sound like there's competing interests there, because it is one project.
Really thought of this as a community center, and we've asked, and we'll ask the UVM Medical Center to participate, and we'll ask others to participate, and at least sort of the thinking and planning and resourcing of the opportunity to develop this as the O'Brien Community Center with a range of current and expanded and better equipped and better facility uses, including, which includes library, kitchen, vent hall, and CHCB and everything else. So it's one thing,
Wonderful.
not several things.
Yeah,
We did this with the Old North End Community Center, where we had ALV sort of having its ability to talk to certain people, Robin's Nest have their ability to talk to different folks. Everybody has their own little constituency, shall we say? So in that case, we'll do the same thing here, you know, where there's an opportunity.
Wonderful, thank you.
For me, I think there are some nice to haves, not need to haves. But I mentioned them early just so they're out there. One, the bridge committee just had a public meeting. We use the gym space now, and larger event hall space. That had like its own AV, audio visual limitations, sound limitations. We often have a lot of public meetings over there, larger events, budget hearings, things like that are held over there, community dinners. So just really thinking about those spaces and the different uses, and I think you already are. But to the extent like an AV component, I know that the price tags for that can certainly go up quickly, and sometimes the electrical work needs to be integrated. So just thinking about that. And then just some public concerns that have come up, in the last couple of years is about the basketball court in the back, and how that space will change or continue to be utilized moving forward. And I know there's been some discussion about needing to remove that, but just want to mention it again that's something that I think maybe some additional feedback that you hear moving forward.
We haven't even thought about the outside of the building much.
I noticed most of this is not even talking to that.
Yeah,
so,
that's good though. That's good. Thank you.
That's just really excited for the project to be moving forward. So thank you.
Thank you.
Charlie, you have any questions, comments, concerns? Well, I think you got the head nod there, Michael.
That was a head nod.
Yeah.
Yay.
We are aligned here that this direction is good, and we're excited to see this continue progressing. So thank you very much to you and your team, and to all of our staff for the work that you all are putting into.
Thanks very much.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Christine, if you wouldn't mind taking an official vote, it would be helpful.
Yeah.
An official head nod.
Do I have a motion to approve this O'Brien Community Center update?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Thomas, second by Bryn. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michael.
See you.
Okay. Next up is item F, on for discussion, our strategic vision area goal update for safe, healthy, connected people.
And I think I saw Chief Audie in the back there too, but perfect. And admittedly, I'm toggling between screens here, so bear with me. But we are excited to present our first quarter update. I think generally things are moving along about as expected. I think where things are slow, there are things that we sort of predicted might be. So not any significant red flags to throw here, but happy to answer any questions that folks may have for us.
I didn't have any questions.
I just was thinking about the future plan for the senior center, and I know it's kind of, that item is a little bit in limbo, but I don't want us to not do any work while we're waiting and then need to scramble to make a decision, and then have it have the opportunity loss of time to be intentional, and then just be reactionary, have something more expensive, something the community is less interested in. So that is the main thing that stood out to me.
Yeah, and what I can say there, Brent, is like you said, we are a little bit in a holding pattern right now, waiting for the determination at the E-Court. But as we look at the community center redevelopment project, we are kind of factoring in the potential for senior programming, in some way, shape, or form to move centers of location over to the OCC and join the rest of the community services team. So we are factoring in some potential space that could be flexible and used for that. There's actually a pretty nice dovetailing with a lot of what the recreation department does programmatically, and a lot of what the senior programming does throughout the day. Obviously, rec is mostly after school time. A lot of our senior programs happen during the day. And we're seeing increasingly an interest in multi-gen programming as well. So I think we're looking at that, you know, again, in these early iterations of design at the community center. How can we incorporate potential parts of the senior center into that and make that functional in the event that that building does end up going away?
Other thoughts about transportation needs to access the facilities? And where
So interestingly, I don't think a lot changes there, despite the proximity to the housing authority units, you know, around the senior center building. We don't have a ton of foot traffic from those facilities. That's not to say none, but I think already are figuring how do we look at this differently. So we've had some conversations with housing authority. We have the new van now, which we're starting to figure out how we can put into play in a different way. So I think it's a little bit maybe further distance to drive, but I don't think that the fundamental issues are wildly different, because I think we are having a hard time getting folks from housing authority units to the senior center already, just because of that walking distance.
Okay.
But yeah, it's a good question. It's definitely something worth thinking about.
Yeah, and I need to add that, you know, however strategic a move like that might be, we need to be very thoughtful about how we engage our community in that conversation. So I wouldn't want to get ahead of a dialogue process before that happens. So that is part of the reason why we haven't done a lot of planning, because we don't know what's going to happen with that property. We have contingency plans, we have strategic plans, but I wouldn't make the move without discussing it with the community first. It would be a significant change for a population that might feel slighted if we didn't at least discuss it with them before we made any big moves.
Absolutely. And I think that's part of my concern of like the amount of outreach and input that of itself is usually a pretty dedicated amount of time that's needed. So I think for me that being mindful of needing to work backwards.
Yeah, duly noted.
I have a question about the renovation discussions for the firehouse, and just broad thoughts on timeline. If that was something that staff wanted to engineer and then pursue funding for, what that might look like.
So the first step of that is we need to do a study of the facility to see what, to develop the plans that we would then bid out. So I've been holding off on coming to council for what will probably be a fund balance request to fund that study until after we've awarded Main Street. So that's part of that.
That's helpful to know. Any other folks have questions? Okay. Oh,
All right,
that's
thank
right. I haven't been checking the Zoom. I'm so
I've
sorry.
been watching it.
Okay. Okay. We will move on to, yeah, thank you for the update. We'll move on to item G. This is on for discussion, amendments to the Unified Land Use and Development Regulations. All right, welcome back, Eric.
Good evening. So I am here tonight to talk with you all about draft amendments to the Unified Land Use and Development Regulations that impact multiple sections. Primarily, Article 4 is the main section of the regulations that we're proposing changes in. As you may recall, at your meeting on July 17th, there was some detailed discussion on the draft amendments. Some concerns were raised at that meeting. Those concerns were discussed at a follow-up meeting. At that meeting as well, a public hearing was set for September 5th. During that public hearing, some new language was presented to you all that was not included with what was advertised for the hearing. So that new information, that new language is what really what I wanted to highlight tonight for additional discussion to potentially set a future public hearing to consider the changes and possibly consider adoption of the regulations. The updated language was shared with the Planning Commission at their regular meeting on September 14th, not for for any formal input, because the process as statute lays out has this really in the hands of council right now. It was more for information and for any feedback. Both the mayor and Councilor Oakley were at that meeting, so they can provide any input or follow-up as needed. But so what's included with the packet tonight, there's some new language that's highlighted in green that I wanted to just go over with you all for any additional comments or questions. And as I mentioned, consideration of setting a public hearing potentially for November 6th to consider this new language as well. Also included with the agenda were the follow-up documents outlining how the draft regulations specific to parking will impact or could impact development, and what changes may need to happen based on the approval of Act 47. So those are referential documents included for your information. So any questions on that before I start going through the text?
Okay.
Okay, great. So the first change, some of the changes are more just for clarification. So there's a couple of those, and the bulk of the changes really come into the parking, primarily related to bicycle parking. So the first item of change is on document page 21, PDF page 4. Just, again, some clarification, some new couple of words added just to clarify what we're talking about under section 4.1. So, and I'll just go through these, and please stop me if you have any questions or need any additional clarification. The next proposed change is on document page 33, PDF page 16. This is under section 4.12B, the last sentence, basically striking the language after the semicolon, so that it ends with, this will apply to all zoning districts except the downtown core zoning district. After reviewing the text, this is actually some carryover language from the previous version. If this sentence stays in, it would basically mean that projects in the Gateway zoning district would not have to abide by the accessible parking standards, the bicycle parking standards, any of the standards for changes of use, the dimensional standards for the size of parking spaces and drive aisles and things of that nature, and also surface parking treatments. So wanted to just make sure that was clarified, that the Gateway will need to abide by the standards in those sections as well. The next change is on document page 35, PDF page 18. Again, just a couple of added words for clarification. The next change is on document page 37, PDF page 20, under Part E, incentives. We've drafted an incentive for underground parking to be able to reduce the number of parking spaces. This change adds in, so that right now, as it was drafted and advertised for the public hearing, that would only apply to the Gateway zoning district. However, the central business district also has the ability for underground parking because it is one of our more intense zoning districts. So wanted to extend that provision to the central business district as well for an incentive to reduce parking. The next change then is on document page 38, PDF page 21. This gets into the location of bicycle parking. Specifically, the new language that's being proposed here would state that if there is existing short-term bicycle parking that would meet the same design and location standards that we're requiring, that could be used to satisfy the short-term parking needs of a potential project. So if parking exists that again meets the standards that we've outlined, being the distance to the entrance to the building, the design consistent with the Association of Bicycle and Pedestrian Professionals, and the style and everything else. If that existing short-term bicycle parking meets those standards, it can apply towards what's required on the site. Next change is on page 39 of the document, PDF page 22. This is where we get into some of what's actually being required for the minimum short-term and long-term bicycle parking. I will say this is one of the areas the Planning Commission did have some discussion on and didn't really reach much of a consensus, I'll say. Related to the first one under multi-unit dwellings, the proposed language would change it to 1 space per 2 bedrooms versus per dwelling unit. It really is going to depend on the project for how that impacts the total number of spaces. If there's more bedrooms in the project, obviously it would require more spaces than not. I will say there is the Local Motion, the statewide bicycle and pedestrian advocacy group, just recently put out some draft bicycle parking standards and some model standards, and what they are proposing is what was originally drafted, the 1 space per dwelling unit. So one of the items to consider for potential change or to leave it as it is. The other 2 changes here are related to short-term parking for the industrial uses, for community centers, cultural facilities, and religious facilities, and for funeral homes, just increasing those numbers. Specifically, the industrial is actually more in line with what the model regs are from Local Motion. The other 2 are what was originally proposed are consistent with the model regs. I think there was generally, I don't want to speak for the Planning Commission, but in general, I think they preferred to see them stay as they were for those 2 uses, the funeral home, for the 3 uses, for the multi-unit, for the funeral homes, and the community centers. But those were the 3 areas where I thought maybe we could increase the square footage potentially to reduce how much short-term parking might be needed. Again, in response to the comments that were made at the July 17th meeting. Any questions on any of that information at this point? And then the last change that was proposed, or the last additional language, is on document page 40, PDF page 23, to basically say that, again, short-term bicycle parking only. If the most appropriate location would be in a city right-of-way, then the applicant would need to get approval from the Department of Public Works, basically to get an encumbrance permit. There would also need to be, as part of that, an agreement for the long-term maintenance and upkeep of that facility, and it would need to be installed consistent with the design and installation standards that are outlined in the regulations. And then finally, the long-term bicycle parking is going to be available free of charge. So those are the changes since the last time you saw this. One thing I would just note, as we're discussing all of these, I don't know if I've mentioned this previously, but since a public hearing was advertised on the draft language, not the new language in green, that draft language is what we are regulating, what we're using to regulate projects that come in. Based on statute, once a public hearing is advertised, municipality can use the draft language, or I think is basically uses the draft language for, I believe it's 150 days. So just as a point of reference, this is what we are using currently to regulate projects against.
Thank you for the walkthrough, Eric. I think what you shared about Planning Commission input reflects what I recall as well. Other questions, comments from councilors?
Couple questions. For the bicycle parking at a restaurant, bar, or brew pub, where would the business be required to put that parking?
So the locations would apply on page 40, PDF page 23. Are you talking the short term or the long term?
I guess both.
So the short term would need to be, and this would apply to any project. It would need to be on site within 50 feet of the publicly accessible entrance, or on site in a covered location if it's more than 50 feet away. And then it would need to be signed as well. The long term is basically just anywhere that under item 8C, basically in a completely enclosed, secure on-site facility. So that could be within the building itself, depending on where it's located, or some other structure that is basically only accessed by the business.
Did the Planning Commission discuss that particular part? I'm just trying to, as I look at this, I'm trying to think of where the businesses are going to put this required parking.
They discussed it in the context of the drafted language originally. Yeah. So, and yeah, I think it's really up to the business, for example. So just thinking next door here at Four Quarters, they've got their brewery in the back, in essence. So that could satisfy the long-term
Trying to
parking
think more
needs.
about like the businesses around the circle.
Yep, sure. So pretty much anywhere they would have a space inside the building could meet that requirement for the long-term parking. So the basement facility or just somewhere on site that they would be able to accommodate it. I will mention that for those businesses, they're already existing uses.
Yeah.
There is a provision that we've added in for if a use changes, thinking about those spaces in particular, they would not need to meet the current standards for parking unless they're adding residential space or expanding the square footage of the building. So
I think of like 3 bikes sitting inside Monkey House might get a little dangerous.
yeah, so right now there is no standard for long-term parking. So if Monkey House were to leave and another business move in there, as long as they don't change the footprint of the building, they would not need to meet
If
the
they
standards.
renovated, that wouldn't be
They would
considered
not.
changing.
That's correct.
Okay, cool.
As long as they're not increasing the amount of square footage.
Okay.
And I believe, let's see, I might be able to tell you where that language is located quickly. It's actually on document page 41, PDF page 24 under item H for changes of use. Yeah, we wanted to be mindful of those particular spaces
Yeah.
and other spaces around the city that really have no ability to
Right,
add
that's what I was
parking, so,
thinking about. Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, because like Four Quarters could build something pretty easily.
Yeah,
or find
exactly.
a place to store it pretty
Right.
easily, but
Yep.
perfect, thank you.
I was wondering, just briefly going back to what was on document page, or 38, PDF page 21. Am I understanding that this added in green text would mean that, is this just for required but not for, what am I, sorry. But not to, get the incentive? So is it just for required, or?
That's correct,
or-
yeah, it would just be for the required piece.
But not count towards the incentive?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah, in order to be eligible for, at least for the transportation demand management reduction, you need to exceed these minimums.
Okay.
So, the new text on page 38 would allow an existing rack to be used. However, if they did not have enough spaces on that rack, they would need to add additional parking to get the incentives or to meet the minimum standards that are required.
Gotcha. All right, that makes sense. Thank you.
Eric, was any data looked at of like what existing developments have for bike parking versus need?
Yeah, so, well, I guess in particular, the one document that outlines the comparison of the regulations, the example that I provided on page 8 of that document is for 211 Main Street, which they do have both long-term and short-term bicycle parking on site. They're, I think, let's see, for their short-term parking, I think they have more than what they would be required to have, or right about what they would be required to have. For the long-term parking, they do have some on site as well, but they're not quite at the numbers that we would be requiring. I have seen some projects where they have specific storage rooms in the building for each unit, which could provide the space necessary for the long term. Pretty much with every project that gets permitted, we do require them to put in some amount of bicycle parking. There is a provision now in our regulations for bicycle parking, at least for a short term, so this would basically enhance what we already require and formalize it a bit more. So we're getting the bicycle parking already, at least the short term, and some projects are putting in either, like I said, storage space or dedicated rooms or dedicated areas for bicycle parking.
Have you heard though about uptake on that?
I have not specifically, and I haven't received any pushback
Okay.
when asked or when it's being discussed. I think for some of the projects that are proposing, and this is just an anecdotal, some of the projects we're seeing that are studio apartments, I think the amount of space that's available in the actual unit is obviously smaller. So those buildings are typically putting in some sort of storage to address things like bicycle parking or just storage in general, so that the tenants have a place to put things
Okay.
and not muddy up the apartment or damage the hallways as they're walking a bike down the corridors, things of that nature.
And do you have thoughts on timeline to start reviewing and potentially revising incentives based on the December 24 changes?
Yeah, so let's see, the Planning Commission, I'm hoping we will start looking at revisions related to Act 47 at our second meeting in October.
Oh,
so
okay.
later this month is my hope. I think on our next agenda we'll be talking about some preservation regulations, and I believe we probably should wrap that up at this next meeting and be able to set a hearing on that. So our second meeting in October, we should be able to start getting into the details on Act 47.
Okay.
Are you done with your questions? So Eric, maybe you can confirm, but I've been given a ratio of 10 bikes can fit into one parking space.
I would say that's accurate, or potentially more. The document that I provided, the September 5 additional information on the regulations that has the examples, does include some
Vertical use.
Yeah, and some other options. So yeah, roughly about 10 bikes or so could fit in a parking space.
Yeah.
Probably more.
Yeah, so 10 or more bikes for one parking space. And in the chart, we're arguing about one space per 2 bedrooms or not. So I certainly, especially for multi-unit dwellings, am in favor with sticking with the planning commissions and the locomotion recommendation
1 space per unit.
of 1 space per unit. I think the changes for G, 412G4, I think those additions help alleviate a lot of my concerns over who's responsible for the off-site bike parking and maintenance. I think that put a lot of onus on the city and on taxpayers, which really is a developer's requirement that they are taking advantage of. So I think that addition is helpful. I don't know that it completely meets the mark, but I think it heads in the right direction, at least as far as how the parking should be designed and maintained, and having a process for how that's approved. So I think those were good additions. Unrelated to that, just throwing in a curveball here. Section 410, let's see, C7, so that's PDF page 15, document page 32.
Yep.
Item number 7.
Yep.
I would love to just change the reference from maximum 100 watt incandescent bulb to 1600 lumens for an LED equivalent.
So to just have that say 1600 lumen max.
Yeah. Again, just trying to move away from incandescent, inefficient lighting to more efficient, less energy intensive lighting, especially lighting that will be on for extended periods of time. So my preference would be to have the city require any lighting converted to LEDs that we reference in our ordinances. Other than that, I think those were the 2 primary things that I wanted to make sure we're included, and again, just advocate for the, proposals brought by the planning commissioners and by local motion.
So just to summarize, if I may, so then the chart, the table on document page 39 PDF 22, leaving the original language in with the exception of the industrial for the short term, to change that
Correct.
to consistent, or more consistent, I'll say, with the guidance.
Correct, that is what I'm advocating, and if the other counselors are willing to, negotiate, then I would say reverting to the locomotion original language for multi-dwelling units.
How do others feel about these options?
It's fine with me.
Yeah, I'm comfortable with, those changes.
I lean towards the suggested updates in green. I think the majority of our development, I don't know if it's the majority, may be too large of a word, but we have a lot of one-bedroom and studio being developed. There are a lot of small households. So I lean towards doing it by bedroom. There's also been previous discussion at the Planning Commission about concern when we were talking about parking and reducing parking requirements for larger bedroom units. There was concern that that created inequity of access to parking, like that a larger family would potentially need more than one vehicle or more than someone in a one bedroom. And I think that applies thinking about bicycles too. Like a studio or one bedroom may just have one person, one user. A 3-4 bedroom may have a family in there with multiple users. So I feel like the green text is more aligned with actual use.
I just counter and say I would defer to local motion's recommendations.
I guess kind of thinking about both of those, is Winooski different enough that maybe locomotion's looking statewide? I guess that would be the one thing I could see kind of comparing what the mayor you're bringing up. And Bryn, your point, because I can definitely see both, but now I am wondering about, Winooski specific data or Winooski specific needs.
Yeah, and I only just reiterate the ratio of 10 bicycles or more per parking space.
Ray, do you want to bring over our public commenter?
Yep, should be here in just a second. All right, Abby, you should be good to go.
Okay. I just wanted to bring in some of what happened at the Planning Commission's conversation around this topic, just so that there's full clarity. The reason that, well, I guess I'll start by saying the original language was taken from Burlington, so it wasn't taken from a rural part or a part unlike Vermont. And since the Planning Commission put it forward, Locomotion came out with their standards, which just happened to be in line with what our standards were. Because I think Burlington is sort of a city of best practices when it comes to bike parking. And then I'll note that the conversation that the Planning Commission was having around the 3+ bedroom, or I should say the 2-bedroom versus the dwelling unit language, was actually opposite of what it sounds like is being discussed, which was there was concern that since we want larger units, that we would be disincentivizing developers to build larger units if we say, when you're building these larger units, you have to have more bike parking. So that was sort of the discussion, like we're trying to do everything in our power to get larger homes and larger units built. And if we're putting more standards on those, like if we're not giving relief to vehicle parking and bike parking and all these other things, like it's just that much less enticing for them to build it. They're obviously not eager to build it already. So I just wanted to frame that was the discussion. If we are thinking about units, we're agnostic to the size, but if we're talking 2-bedroom, we're potentially saying, okay, if we build we want, what we're lacking in the city, we're going to make you do more. So I just wanted to give that context to that discussion. Thank you.
Any other public comments? Thank you, Abby, for clarifying. The discussion around bicycle parking was concern about disincentivizing larger units. I was referring to a previous discussion around car parking, where there was concern about not providing enough car parking to larger units. Many ways to look at it.
So in this example, if it was to stay 1 space per 2 bedrooms, then 3 bedrooms would require 2 bicycle spaces.
Correct, yes.
Sorry, can you say that again?
So the way it's written, it's 1 bicycle parking space per 2 bedrooms. If it's 3 bedrooms, then it's 2 bicycle spaces,
It's
so
not 1.5.
it wouldn't be.
That doesn't make any sense. Wouldn't 4 bedrooms require 2 bike spaces?
How would you calculate that? It's the overall
Typically,
units?
it's rounded up. Any percentages are rounded up to the.
But is it per unit? If there were like 2 3-bedroom units, would you count across those 6 bedrooms?
Yes, yeah, we would look at the total number of bedrooms in the whole project to do the calculation. But if it was just 1 unit, then yeah.
So Abby's just saying it might disincentivize a 3-bedroom home with saying, fine, you need 2 bicycle parking spaces for a 3-bedroom
Yeah.
home.
Yeah, so if there was a project that was 10 units, all with 3 bedrooms, if we were doing it on a per bedroom basis, that would require 15 long-term spaces versus a per unit basis, which would just be 10. So yes, there is a potential disincentive to do the larger units or have more bedrooms in the units. So
I'm fine changing it back to the 1 unit. Charlie, I don't know.
It does seem that doing it by the dwelling does like directly disincentivize building the type of housing that our constituents have said over and over that we need.
Okay. So, would we like to move forward with calling a new public hearing? Well, actually, okay, we talked about multi-dwelling. How do folks feel about the changes to industrial, funeral, and community center cultural facility?
I'm fine with the changes there.
I also support those changes.
Are the hotel recommendations, are those from local motion as well?
I believe they're consistent with what local motion has. Let me just double check here. Yes, they're the same as what's been recommended.
Okay.
Aurora or Charlie, feelings about the square footage changes?
They look practical to me.
So to confirm, the industrial in green lines up with local motion's recommendation, and the new, the community center and funeral home original, so not in green, aligns.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah, for local motion for the industrial, it is 25,000. one space per 25,000 gross square feet. So this is a little less than what they've included, but closer than the 10,000 originally.
So, not to complicate things, but I think going back to the original for the community center makes sense to me. So going back to the 1,000, because I do see, right, that would end up having more spaces overall. And I do
Correct.
see the bike racks at the O'Brien Center being used a lot. But the funeral home, I don't see that as, I mean, maybe I'm making assumptions, but I don't necessarily see that as needing as much bike parking. So the 2,000 makes more sense to me. Sorry to
Don't be sorry.
throw that wedge in there, but yeah, I think it's good to have more bikes for the community center.
And I'm willing to come to the middle and say, like, if we can adjust the multi-dwelling unit back to the, from 2-bedroom to dwelling units and revert back from 2,000 suggested by council to 1,000 for the community center, then I think I'm fine with the industrial funeral home as proposed for moving forward to public hearing.
I'm good with that.
Okay. So, I am looking for a motion to set another public hearing on November 6th, including all of the changes in this document except for the multi-dwelling unit and community center, cultural facility, religious facility use.
So moved.
Sorry, if I may, also including the change under section
And
410.
Bryn's suggestion about the lumens.
Okay.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you.
Did you just move this?
I did.
Motion by Bryn,
Second.
second by Aurora. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Motion carries. Thank you.
Great, thank you all very much.
Thank you for your work on this.
Yeah,
Absolutely, thank you.
Okay.
Can we do a break?
Yeah, it is 7:14. I'm gonna call a 6-minute break. We will, so it is 7:20. I'll reconvene us on item H. This is on for discussion. Fiscal year 2025 budget goal setting. Who will kick us off?
I'll take that for now. So council's asked to set goals for the fiscal year. I'm just reading from the cover sheet, so if you've already read it, you can tune out for a little minute here. For fiscal year 2024-2025, that budget, the budget for that fiscal year to inform how staff develops that proposed budget over the next weeks and months. So council's asked to do something a little bit unusual, but not compared to a few years ago, perhaps. Council's asked to choose one of the options that I'll describe here. So 1, 2, 3, and 4. So the first option is minimal tax rate increase budget. The goal of this would be to minimize the projected tax rate increase, but would also mean cuts to existing services and possibly staff. I'm not trying to be dramatic here, but minimal tax rate increase will result in one of those things. If council chooses this option, members are asked to identify potential master plan vision areas for service reductions. So again, to remind everyone, that's economic vitality, municipal infrastructure, housing, or safe, healthy, connected people. The second option is level services budget. This would allow for costs for existing services to be updated for estimated inflation or cost of living increases, but does not increase investment in any area to catch up on deficiencies. So again, first option is minimal tax rate increase. Second option is level services. The third option would be a catch-up budget. This would allow for costs for existing services to be updated and for some increases to catch up on some deficiencies. And know that you have a very practical staff. We're not interested in increasing the budget to the point of unsustainability for our residents. But we do recognize that the reality is we've underinvested in the services that this community deserves. And so we'd like to this option would allow us to try to make some strategic investments in this budget. So again, if council does choose this option, the catch-up budget option, members of council are asked to identify priority master plan and vision areas to fund. Again, economic vitality, municipal infrastructure, housing, or safe, healthy, connected people. And then the fourth option is mix of service cuts and catch-up investments. If council chooses this option, members are asked to identify which master plan vision areas to reduce and which to fund. So again, the four options that I'm described are minimal tax rate increase budget, level services budget, a catch-up budget, or a mix of service cuts and catch-up investments. I recognize this is a hard question to be asking council to be deciding right now, but this is the reality of the types of budgets that staff have to go through, and so we want to make this a very transparent process by asking council to discuss this in public. Thank you.
Thank you, Elaine. Angela, would you be able to walk through the data memo, please?
I can. There is quite a bit of information that has been included in here. The contextual information that we started with is the tax rate history, showing what our increases have been historically to the municipal tax rate in comparison to the consumer price index, which is what we do for our cost of living increases for staff. I also include the percentage of voter approval for the people who turned out in an election to support our budget, to show how much of the community is being supportive of the city's financial work. We've also included a 10-year tax rate increase for the municipal versus the education side to show that the city has been extremely conservative in the amount that we have increased our taxes over the last 10 years. At this point, we have increased from between fiscal year 2014 to fiscal year 2024, 25%. In that time, the school has increased their tax rate 75%. We are just now this fiscal year at the same rate that the school was at in 2014. One of the new pieces of information that was included in this budget this year was the grand list growth history. The grand list growth is one of the things that can offset our tax rate increase. Because the city of Winooski is landlocked and almost completely built out, we don't have a lot of opportunity for our grand list to grow outside of projects that are redeveloped on existing lots, usually increasing the density of the city. Over the last 5 years, we have roughly been in the 1% range, from a low of 0.5% this current fiscal year up to a high of 1.6% in 2021. The breakdown on our taxes that have increased year to year is shown in the next graph. And I've broken it out in between the amount of new tax dollars that we raised, between the amount of new tax dollars that was associated with the grand list growth and the amount that was associated with the tax rate increase. So you can see in that year where we had that larger grand list growth, how much of that bar was taken up. And we were able to keep that tax rate impact to a minimum there. Unfortunately, that is not something that we can directly impact. We can incentivize people to redevelop here, but not something that we can force. So one of our obviously major costs to the city is wages and benefits. Over 62% of the general fund budget is our staff and their related costs with health insurance, FICA Medi, all of the benefits that we provide to staff. Wage and benefit increases annually have ranged around 6%, low of 2.2 in 2020 and a high of 10.6 in 2023, which was obviously the high rate of inflation at that time. One of the things that the Finance Commission raised was to try and figure out how much staff is being supported by these dollars. When I put that information in this chart originally, it was a little misleading because we have a 24/7 police station. Seeing the number of employees compared to the number of employees in community services was a little disproportionate. So I converted it instead of number of people to number of hours that those dollars buy. We in the general fund have approximately 116,700 hours of staff time that is devoted across all of the service areas, with over 41,000 being police service hours and another 33,000 being community service hours. Those are our most highly funded areas in terms of staff time. So the other new piece of information that was included this year was prior fiscal year backgrounds for items where the city had invested in those years where tax increases were really targeted. We went back 5 years. In 2020, the big increase that year was increasing the capital budget for anticipating Main Street and the pool. That was a little bit offset by the local options tax increase that year. So only a portion of this was funded by tax dollars. Much of it was the local options tax revenue. In 2021, we had to add in pool operations. So community services was increased by over 140,000. And then fire department staffing costs went up slightly, just over $16,000 to add per diem coverage, which allows us to schedule shift workers to cover some of the time when our full-time staff is not here. In 2022, that represented the year where the Working Communities Challenge Grant came on board, which was not tax funded, but did represent a bottom line increase. And then community services, we shifted the Thrive Childcare program from a standalone program into the general fund because it was unable to support itself with its fees. This represented an impact to taxes of just over $26,000. 2023, it was a variety of things. Administration, it was mostly our general services partners, our regional partners with Green Mountain Transit, needing an increase of $35,000 for their fees. And then we included the $22,500 increase for the local option tax percentage that's being paid to downtown Winooski. Community services saw an increase in that year of about $212,000 for ESSER-related staff. In that year, it was offset by funding coming from the school. Those positions have mostly been retained in the current fiscal year, but are no longer supported by that contract. Also in fiscal year 23, we increased staffing costs by about $30,000, which was related to a promotion for one of the assistant fire marshal positions. That is Bruce Palmer's position now, which has taken on a lot more of the administrative managerial capacity in that department. And then finally, for the current fiscal year, we invested additional money into software services and the supplies cost and legal services to reflect the increases in prices that we've seen over time. Community services shifted the senior center into the general fund at a cost of around $24,000 because that program no longer has a constant revenue stream from bingo. We are no longer running bingo at that center, so that is being supplemented by general fund taxes. Fire department increased salary and benefits to increase weekend coverage and included $7,000 for diesel fuel to support St. Michael's College for mutual aid coverage. The additional funding that had been budgeted for the fire department, as you know, has been reallocated to a diesel fuel tracking system to also support that effort. In the police department, we increased about $76,000 for administrative support that would be needed here on site should regional dispatch be implemented. That funding is currently on hold in that budget. And then finally, this fiscal year, Public Works had increases to their vehicle and equipment maintenance lines of just over $40,000, and line striping contract increased about $8,000. Both of those items were due to inflation and rising costs. Whew, okay. Moving forward, we've done some initial looks at what is going to be coming in FY25. This is all very preliminary because we're looking ahead quite a bit of time. The current estimate for the cost of living increase is 4%. The July cost of living was 3.2 and August was 3.7. So we're trending around a more average number than what we had seen last year. We've looked at several agencies that do forecasts of what the consumer price index is going to do in the future. We are using the October to October cost of living, and they are estimating that to between 3% and 4.88%. So we went right down the middle with a slight edge towards the high side. That impact would be about 142,000 citywide, with about 116,000 in general fund alone. Now, that is representative only of a cost of living increase. That does not include any increases related to step increases for existing staff. Second item that is new, the Vermont House and Senate overrode Phil Scott's veto for H217 for the child care payroll tax. This is a 0.44% tax for employers to remit to the state of Vermont. Based on the existing wages, this would be about $23,000 of additional expense to the city in the general fund alone. We are estimating, again, about a 0.8% increase in the grand list that would offset some of these increases. This would be only about $12,500 worth of new revenue into the city from that growth. The next big cost to the city is health insurance. We generally provide our insurance through the Vermont Health Connect. We offer Blue Cross Blue Shield plans. The rate that is estimated by our benefits advisor for the next year is 13.175%. Applied to our existing staff and their existing benefit makeup, that would be about $144,000 increase over the existing year. And then this is included here, but is not included in the estimated impact because it's not a ton of money. The tax increment financing district is expiring this May. We will be paying off our debt service. And so next fiscal year, the increment dollars that have been going to repay that debt will flow into the general fund. That was estimated to be about $1.5 million. Of that $1.5 million, $445,000 is expenses that will continue, like legal services, the general fund transfer that we've been receiving, and then the support of our community and economic development fund. Council had earmarked about $623,000 for the Main Street debt service that will come from the USDA loans to construct the project. And last year, council assigned $409,000 that was used from ARPA for expenses that were not included in the tax rate increase. Those were stated that they would come from TIF dollars when the TIF expired. This leaves about $23,000 available for allocation. Just those items, without increasing anything else or the step increases for staff, represent about a 2.2% increase just to the tax rate. There's still some unknowns. While we have some more concrete details about the school resource officer, we are still working out how that is going to look financially. I have the memo from the superintendent that I'm working through, and Elaine and I are working on what the funding structure would look like for that position moving forward. So the amount of compensation that we will ultimately receive is still undetermined at this point. We are still experiencing staffing shortages. We have had long-term vacancies in the police department, public works, and fire. Some of these have been vacant for months, and this also includes our code enforcement position. We are seeing applications come in, but we are seeing a lack of response to requests for interviews or people who receive offer letters that do not accept the position. Another emerging issue that is going to be confusing is our reappraisal. The assessors have told us that our reappraisal will be in on April 1st of this year. This will change the grand list, so the denominator that goes into all of the calculation of our tax rate. So the tax rate that we're calculating now will look very different from the tax rate that people will see on their bill. The percentage increase should still apply to the amount that they pay in total. but we are going to try and be as transparent and clear about this as possible. It is a very confusing thing, and we're going to try and demonstrate it as easily as we can to the general public. Elaine does have more information on this next topic, and that is the regional dispatch. It is still in a holding pattern, as far as I know. So we had funding that was set aside for that transition that is still on hold, but this project is not dead yet and could still move forward. And lastly, the Winooski River Bridge replacement has received grant funding through the state, as you are aware, and the city of Winooski would be responsible for a portion of the grant match for that project, which is currently estimated to be about $3 million. We are unlikely to be able to fund that directly from our coffers and would likely need to bond. John Rauscher has recommended that we go to a bond vote. Whether that is at town meeting or not would be at the discretion of council, but it is currently staff's recommendation. And then the final section is a comparison year over year of how the tax bill breaks down between all of our different departments. It's a lot of information.
And then the second memo is a list of unfunded things that we identified last year, to show a picture of many outstanding needs, not all of which have dollars identified.
Correct, and there are some items in underline that are new since last year, not necessarily to staff, but you didn't see them in a list like this last year.
Excellent, thank you, Elaine. Okay, before we get into discussion about the goals asked, let's take a moment to ask any clarifying questions for Elaine or Angela or other staff on the data we've been presented.
Thank you for all of the work that you put into this. Not really a question, I just want to kind of make clear that when we say voter approval of the budget, that doesn't necessarily mean voter approval of the budget. People may vote yes because they believe in what we're doing, but they may not approve of the amount of money that we're asking them to pay, which I think is what a lot of us are hearing from our voters, that our taxes here are extremely high and keep getting higher. So I just don't want to correlate people approving it because they think that we're doing our best to give them a budget and them actually being okay with paying that much money.
It's interesting, Thomas. I had a note down here that's very much the opposite. We have this high approval of our budgets, and I worry that, we're here to represent all residents and not just those who might have the best access to us. So thinking about who are the residents who we're not hearing from too. I want to make sure that's something that we're holding, especially when we think about our equity assessment worksheet and how that might apply to our budget process.
Well, so this is the reason why I had included in the cover sheet the results of the ARPA memo, and then the equity assessment, and then did I miss I forgot to ask for the community engagement link, right? I don't see it here. So I would think back to all of the community engagement sessions we've been doing as well. And the what we heard from the ARPA outreach. Angela, I don't know if you can answer this. I am curious why in FY23 and 24, homestead education tax rate is actually higher than non-residential. Perhaps that's a state question.
I don't know the statistics behind that at the state. The state is definitely the source of that calculation.
Thank you.
Angela, are you accounting for, let's see, you've got COLA, are you accounting for any anticipated other than, health benefits, any other rate increases? Utility rate increases or partner program cost increases?
So we do that during the building of the budget. We have not started building the budget yet, but we do anticipate those things.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a good point because every year, we see those requests increase.
And some of them can be more significant than others. I know there's, and for just discussion, I know there's a lot of like, things are in flux on, the O'Brien Center, like is that gonna be an FY25 consideration? As well as, Memorial Park and potential transfer of ownership for that. So just also, there are, in addition to the unknowns that are provided, there are some other kind of significant, potentially significant unknowns to call out.
Elaine, would you want to speak to either of those?
Do you want me to repeat? I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, could you repeat? I had a big crowd walk by just now.
No worries. So I was just talking, there were a number of unknowns called out for us to reflect on, and I also wanted to mention there are some things that are still to be determined, such as ownership of and maintenance of Memorial Park.
O'Brien Center transition?
And then the transition of management ownership of the O'Brien Center. Thanks. So there are just two examples of things that are still unknowns that may influence FY25.
Are you asking me to comment on other possible unknowns? I didn't hear the question.
I think do you expect those to impact the will those costs come up in FY25 budget?
Yes, I'm anticipating there will be some. So again, like that's why we've asked council for a more general direction based on the visionaries as opposed to very specific cuts, because that's not appropriate level of like you don't have enough information, right, in terms of those specifics. Yeah, so the general area would be helpful, and then we would be developing more detail as we develop the budget for you to consider more specifically.
And in terms of the O'Brien Community Center, during his presentation, Michael mentioned that the city has told him how much we are able to pay in rent. That is equivalent to the amount of the burden on the taxpayers right now. So there should be no impact to the tax rate for the city beginning to pay rent at that space instead of being the owner.
Assuming we can raise the money that's needed to keep it level there.
So thank you, Angela, for that clarification. I think that's very helpful to capture and frame.
Any other data background questions? Okay, so we've been asked by staff to provide direction on one of these budget options and prioritize strategic vision areas. This is very different from the process we used last year, where because of the terminating grant dollars, we were very specific about positions and programs and what to keep and what to remove. I think this approach that Elaine has presented could allow us to better align on direction for staff as they draft a budget and then defer to their expertise on, well, assuming we don't choose level services or if it's any other option, relying on their expertise about priority additions, deficiencies, et cetera, and what comes back to us. So I think if that is the approach we take, then we wouldn't be saying like, I want to see X amount of dollars for X program in this conversation. And we could get more in the details on those specifics through each budget presentation. I would like us to try to start there. though
It is what's been asked.
we'll see what happens. And I will say that I'm actually pretty pleased to see level services at 2.21%, with a 4% CPI. Although considering what we've heard, step increases on included partner fees, et cetera, I suspect it would actually be even a little bit higher. But I would support some catch-up in deficiencies, not to go too wild. And my personal priority would be in the realm of municipal infrastructure. And yes, who would like to share thoughts next?
Are you saying option 3 or option 4?
I am supporting option 3, with my focus being in municipal infrastructure.
I think I would have to agree with that.
Others?
Charlie, you unmuted.
Yeah, just based on my experience with the community, my email inbox, I hear the most from constituents about lacking infrastructure. That might be because we've invested so heartily in programmatic stuff. But I think that it would be negligent to ignore everything that we've heard from so many different areas of the community regarding striping, sidewalks, safety, walkability. That's sort of where my eyes are set currently in the conversation.
All right, I am also in favor of option 3. If I had to choose one area, I would do community services. I mean, safe, healthy, connected people, specifically community services and fire and code, which we're not getting into, but those are consistent. I see that there's still consistent underfunding that I worry is just going to snowball. But municipal infrastructure would be my second choice.
I will be the outlier as usual and say I'm in favor of number 4, mix of service cuts and catch up.
I mean, that was my first thought, but
I think reasoning, I think there were some grant funds that ended that we opted to fund for FY24 with the direction that we wanted to have staff look at reducing from full subsidy to partial subsidy, or progressively moving with the intent of perhaps progressively moving towards self-funding, and using their own expertise to explore ways to get to that best with the eye towards equity and access needs. That was just something that sticks with me from the last budget conversation. For catch-up, I think we absolutely need to allocate funds towards infrastructure needs. I would like to see some just a year-over-year line item for line striping and traffic calming especially. I think it would be wise to start saving and setting some funds aside for the bridge project, and perhaps putting what we can into interest-bearing escrow, or whatever Angela recommends. But however we can to just decrease the longer-term impact and just prepare ourselves judiciously for that
Bryn.
expense.
Oh, maybe I should I was just gonna say, I got some information from Ray earlier that addresses your, the issue with the subsidized programs and self-funding. So I think he's actually working on that already.
Fantastic.
To put him on the spot.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think, to be clear, we are, not even, we're just a quarter into the first year where we're bouncing back, and ESSER just finished on September 30th. So we're just sort of now moving into fee-based programming. So you will see, as part of this upcoming budget, a look at what does a shift from fully subsidized, fully free programming to a more mixed model look like. I think candidly, that's going to be built on some speculation, right? Because we're not going to have a ton of trend data to build that from. But we are going to be considering that certainly as part of our approach. I think we recognize coming out of ESSER, there's got to be some revenue stream coming in. And I think that the art in this is going to be, how do we do that? How do we turn that knob and not see participation and enrollments fall off? And that's where the equity lens is really going to come in for us. So I think certainly we're just starting the budget building process, so more to come, but I just want to acknowledge we are looking at that, and you will see that addressed as part of the fiscal year 25 budget. Hard to say at this point how those revenue numbers will look different, but I think that they will likely look different for 25.
And I think with that, it's not necessarily a cut in the formal sense, but more of just a gradual reduction in full subsidy to partial gradations of partial subsidy. And then I know regional dispatch is on hold, but that is obviously a rather large chunk of money. So wanting to have some assurance that in FY25 or sooner that we'll see some movement there. Otherwise, I'd love to see that go to other infrastructure projects.
Or, I don't know, Elaine, how you're thinking about if regional dispatch doesn't move forward, addressing some of the problems that it is supposed to address.
Yeah.
In our filing code.
That's right.
Sorry, you were going to say something, I think.
No, just I in terms of like option 4, like I recognize the need to try to not raise taxes as much as we can, but I would not want to suggest service cuts if that meant a loss of staff, because I think that would also create great detriment to the city. So I like what Bryn was saying. If there are other ways to raise money, donation boxes at the parks, etc.
Yeah, I do want to say one thing. When I don't think we can talk about reduction to our community service and you can't reduce community services and continue the equitable work that they're doing. So I do want to say that, we are currently not meeting all of our community's needs through that. And again, I'll point out that it is one of our least funded but highest hour departments. So that's something to keep in mind too.
That is because a number of those positions are seasonal positions without benefits. So they do a lot of hours for lower cost because they do not have the cost for health insurance, life insurance, dental, vision, all the other incidentals.
I think also what I was just hearing from what Bryn was describing wouldn't actually impact any services. It's not a reduction in services, or what Ray is saying is just looking at funding structure. So folks who can pay and are willing to do for some programs and helps with subsidy.
Yeah.
I feel like we have some fairly aligned guidance to offer here.
Yeah, I heard option 3, some catch up, don't go crazy. Definitely consensus on municipal infrastructure. Staff might make some other strategic recommendations, but understand that was the direction from council, is really municipal infrastructure. Does that reflect what you all were saying?
I believe so.
You have one vote for safe, healthy, connected people.
Thank you. All right, I appreciate you all doing that discussion.
And you might have noticed, I sent an email out earlier. I've been hearing questions through the last couple weeks that relate to budget. I shared those with staff. We have some responses back, which I shared via email. There's more to come. And so I think that detailed information can help inform the next step in this process. And continue to raise questions that you have in the meantime.
I have a clarifying question on the memo 2. The really should do's. I know most of these are carryovers from this past year. But like the first bullet on the second page is ash tree removal. I'm probably confusing that with the allocation of funds for the tree removal.
Main Street?
Yeah. No.
Oh.
The other,
What was a grant?
there was a budget.
The one that we did,
Yeah.
Adjustment requested.
recently, yeah. So that is a different thing. So the trees that we took down through that allocation were hazard trees in Landry and Cassavant. So not necessarily ash trees. This is looking more strategically at the recommendation right now that ash trees proactively come down sort of in anticipation of emerald ash borer coming through. So that it was a different thing, but it is something we're starting to look at least on the park side. I have not circled around with John on that, John Rauscher, and need to, but something we're starting to look at.
One thing that was mentioned in the memo is like, at least some of these might be eligible for grant projects. I know it might be hard, but is it possible to flag the ones, or are they the ones that are underlined? What could be grant eligible versus what would be fully subsidized by the city? Or,
Underlines are new from last year.
okay, I was guessing, but.
So part of the policy priorities and strategies for from council for this fiscal year is to look at what was it? It was something related to what we've been missing without grant funding. So that will be part of the analysis.
Okay.
I also had that question. I wonder if we can, and if this is not possible, feel free to ignore or let me know. But thinking about, I think there sometimes is a difference between like the amount of money / how hard it, like, what am I trying to say? I think that in some areas, say police have a lot more access to like funds outside of taxes, and those seem a little easier to get versus community service, which there are a lot of grants, but they're for a little bit of money, so it's a lot of work for a little money. And I'm wondering if that can be taken into account, because I do feel like municipal infrastructure actually is an area that can bring in a lot of state and federal money. But say fire is also another example where I'm not seeing a whole lot of big grants for that. So it feels like if there's grant money that we can bring to some of our departments, that would be like kind of a good to know in general, versus that then makes more sense for us to then pay into the ones that have less access to grant state and federal funds. If that made sense. It was a little rambling.
One thing that I do want to flag in terms of grants for the police department is that oftentimes they come with a supplement, not supplant clause. So we cannot use police grants to do things that we have previously budgeted for. So we could not cut our budget and then backfill it with grant money. That would be.
I'm not saying that. I'm saying like when we're considering adding items that aren't like within these should do list, especially the one time.
Yeah, return on investment or return on effort for grant work is certainly part of the calculus.
Yeah, that would just be kind of helpful to know.
I would also say, as a general observation, a capital project to create something new can get some grant funded,
But we have
never
more.
all of it, right?
Yeah.
But anything operational or like ongoing staffing often does not.
Yeah.
And we ran into the issue with the Main Street project in terms of the grant funding that we received initially. We were unable to utilize at least 3 of those grants due to terms in the grant conditions that would have required us to do Buy American or Buy American Steel. That would have increased the cost of the project beyond the amount of grants that we were going to receive.
But I think that's something that we can keep in mind later in this process is what are services that we alone can deliver
Yeah.
versus where we can get support from outside.
Yeah.
Do we still have any public attendees? No, no comments. You do have one. Oh, welcome up, welcome up.
I figured there was something.
I'm
you
sorry, I
wanted to
just
say.
got used to no comment.
No, you're fine, you're fine. I was encouraged by the discussion that just happened, that you're encouraging a catch-up budget. I think I would interpret our vote as approval. That is actual, people putting marks on paper to approve the budgets that people are, that the city is putting forward. And I think that we have a community that is really excited about what the future holds for us. But the only way that we can do that is by investing in that community. And so without actually putting money towards things that we're building and then being able to sustain it, we're going to be in trouble. And so I think there's a lot of really cool projects on the horizon. I just really want to encourage council to encourage those projects and then also look for more than 1 year at a time, but think about that long-term sustainability.
Thank you so much. Can you state your name for the record, please?
Yes, Jess Wignall.
And I'm so sorry, I should have invited public comment before we made the final decision, but
Yeah.
sounds very aligned with what we're discussing.
Yes, I was encouraged to hear it. I was going to say something about
Thank you so much for
Yes.
coming in.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay. Are you good? Anything else useful for staff?
This is going to be an evolving conversation, so bear with us as we go through that and lead you through that as best we can. And thank you for your work today.
Thank you so much. And yeah, Angela, I appreciate that you got all of that background information to us while you were doing audit and all the other things you do. And John and Ray for responding to messages they received just today. And everyone, all staff, for your work this evening. That is the end of tonight's agenda. Do you have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
Motion by Thomas, second by Aurora. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Motion carries. Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Thank you.